Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Now, my name is Josh, and I'm the creator and host of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, and I believe that we all have unlimited potential, and this show exists to help us find it and set it loose on the motorsports industry. And with the right mindset, coupled with focused and consistent action, we can make motorsports an unstoppable force. By empowering riders and racers with the knowledge they need and they crave to grow their program, we can exponentially improve and grow the motorsports industry. I want you to take this advice, whether you are an off-road racer or UTV, backcountry snowmobiler, drag racer, supercross, does not matter. I want you to take this advice and see how you can improve your program. Now, earlier I said this show is powered by AMSOIL, and they are partners in accomplishing the mission that I just described. But I want to tell you a little bit more about AMSOIL right now. You've probably seen them around at Sturgis or the AMSOIL Championship Snowcross or at maybe your local track. They're all over the power sports world, and here's why. They get it. They're gearheads, they're riders, they're racers, and they have the passion, and they have the same vision that I just described earlier. They're also chemists, they're engineers, and they're really good at making synthetic oil. Now, their time at the track and on the streets has allowed them to see firsthand how tough equipment is on oil. You know, there's extreme heat, there's tons of stress, high RPM riding, the things that we're all used to seeing, and we actually are the reason why our vehicles get punished so much. But all those things conspire against the vehicle, including us, to slow it down and sideline it. But AMSOIL, fortunately, handcrafts synthetic lubricants that fight wear, they resist extreme heat, so that you can get the most power and best performance out of whatever you ride. Visit AMSOIL.com/sponsor for details. That's AMSOIL.com/sponsor for details. You can check out their full line of products. All right, our featured guest today is none other than RJ Anderson. He's an off-road racer. He's the star of the XP1K video series, and he's been someone I've wanted on this show for a long time. Now, before I get into the interview, I have a few other things I want to cover with you. One, head over to iTunes, leave a rating review, leave your feedback. That would be phenomenal. That is one of the key ways that we create more exposure for this show, and that then allows us to continue to bring on amazing guests. All right, so go head over there and leave a rating review. And in whatever podcast player you use, subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming guests. And next up, we have MotoStar Taylor Hyman coming on. And in case you missed our last episode, we had David McKinney. He's the creative marketing manager for 509. And I have been getting some incredibly positive feedback about that show. So hopefully that added value for folks, but I've just been very pleased with the response we've been getting. Now, this particular episode is brought to you by SolderWeld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology, and they're also running a giveaway for a trip to Vegas to Reno. So by the time this releases on July 24th of 2018, you'll still have some time to go online, check out their giveaway, and be eligible for a trip to Vegas to Reno. I actually will tell you more about that right after Heat 1 before we move into Heat 2, and that's when we thank our sponsors. The other coverage for the show is brought to you by TopThePodium.com. They're experts in motorsport sponsorship. Bold Racing and Suspension, they're a family race team and custom suspension experts. Armor Coat, they simplify your cleaning process. And then Crash Addict Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, including MBRP Powersports, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, GSP XTV Axles, and One Stop Performance. Now, the structure of this podcast is set up like a race. We'll begin with a basic introduction in the qualifier, and then in Heat 1, we'll dive into RJ's background. In Heat 2, we'll talk about sponsorship, tactics, and strategies. In a main event, we will discuss mindset, and then we'll end at the finish line. That's where we're going to get closing comment and contact info for RJ. without further ado, let's hop in. Today, I'm joined by our featured guest, someone I have been pursuing for quite some time now. I think my first pursuit started in like the early 20s in the episodes, and that's RJ Anderson. So, RJ, I would love for you to take a minute, fill in the gaps from that intro, and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, how's it going? I'm glad we could finally connect. Sorry, I knew it took a little bit there, but yeah, I'm RJ Anderson. I'm 25 years old from Riverside, California, and I've been in off-road racing for just over 10 years now. And in those 10 years, I've become a 6-time champion with over 100 career podiums. And many actually probably know me more nowadays from my viral videos and my poor decisions I do from my XP1K video series and a Polaris Razor.
Yeah, I mean, those videos are just so cool. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, for folks listening right now, we had both Matt and Josh Martelli on this show, and they're like huge parts of the XP1K series videos. And obviously you are, RJ, too. Like, you're the main feature in those. But we've talked a lot about the virality of those videos, and it's just incredible. Like, what that's done for the industry in general, what it's done for Polaris, what it's done for your career. And, you know, obviously with Mad Media, it's at this point, it's almost eclipsing Gymkhana when that series first came out with Ken Block. So it's like, it's really amazing that whole thing has happened and been so successful.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, that was obviously the goal when we first dreamed it up, is to have something become successful, but you never know, you know, and it's cool that you've already had the Martellis and Joey on as well, because that's kind of how this whole thing started is one day I was talking to Joey back, this is a while ago, probably back in 2009 to 2010-ish.
Yeah.
Is how long ago this all started. And I was talking to him, he'd become a friend of mine. He was running around taking photos. YouTube Underground was just kind of starting. It wasn't a lot to him back then. He still had a full-time job, and I was just a kid, you know, racing. I was still in high school, and I was talking to him about what I wanted to do, and I was one of the kids up and coming in the UTV scene. It was just growing, and I was talking to him about it, and he's like, he had just become partners with the Martelli brothers in Mad Media, and he goes, well, dude, I love your idea. I have my partners, like, this is where they came from. They've helped film Gymkhana. They've filmed all these things. They know how to put something like this together. And that's kind of originally how it just started, is us spitballing as friends. And then I went to Polaris and told Craig Scanlon, my boss at the time, who now, you know, from racing, is the idea, and he loved it. He's like, put them together. So I told Joey, hey, Polaris likes this idea. So Joey and the Martelli brothers went back and they put a plan together, and they sold it to Polaris, and they said, okay, you guys got a shot at this thing. And they put the budget together with Polaris and Mad Media, and we went for it. And it's cool to be able to not only land the first one and have it be successful, but to go on and do 4 more since then. It's been a crazy ride for sure.
Yeah, and it's got to be tough to try to outdo yourself. I mean, I don't know what's next. You're going to have to do like a Travis Pastrana. You're going to have to jump Travis Pastrana as he's jumping something crazy. That's going to have to be XP1K 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah, one thing I don't think I'll ever do is try to outdo Travis Pastrana. That guy's a legend, and I do actually, I raced him we did a Polaris Celebrity RS1 race.
Yeah.
And my little brother actually won it. He got first, I got second, Travis got third. So I think if we end on that note, me beating Travis Pastrana, that's enough for me.
Perfect. I think that's a good accomplishment. You're like, I never want to race again. We're done. Yep. I retire.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't think very many people can say that they've outdone Travis at something. So
no.
I just gotta quit while I'm ahead right there.
Right. If he ever listens to this show, which he probably won't, but if he does, he's gonna be coming after you. You know that. Like yeah. It's gonna be it's gonna be RS1 race part 2, and Ronnie's gonna have to be there too.
I'm sure he's already thought of ways how he can get us back out to races, because one thing Travis doesn't like doing is losing, for sure.
Right, definitely. Well, what I want to do is dive a little bit deeper into your background in Heat 1 and know a little bit more about your story. So I want to go back in time to when you actually first got into the motorsports world. Now, I know a little bit about your family and how that all started, but people listening might not know that. You know, a lot of the off-road folks know you, but the backcountry snowmobilers might not know you. So I want to know the details. How'd you get started? And I want you to take us on a journey to how you got from that point to where you're at today.
Yeah, so the people that actually know me, it's always kind of a joke, is I had no choice. I was literally born into this world. My dad, who's Randy Anderson, he was the crew chief for Walker Evans my dad started there when he was 18 years old and still works there today. But so back in the day, my dad actually started there at 16. I told the story sometimes, I even mess it up myself. But I started there at 16, and at 18 became Walker's crew chief and went on to many different drivers: Rob McCacken, Scott Douglas, Brian Stewart, Walker Evans, all kinds of guys through there. He was the head crew chief. He was building trucks. They went from winning the first Baja 1000 overall four-wheel vehicle to their accomplishments together tenfold of what I've done to this day. But so that's where my dad came from, is he was the crew chief for Walker Evans. And when I was born, they were just at their end of racing. I think I was 5 years old, traveling around to off-road races when Walker was doing his farewell tour. It was the year 2000 or 99, so I was 6 or 7 years old. And I knew enough about that I was lucky to go around, but my dad was gone so much. If I wanted to go see my dad, we basically had to go to the races just to hang out with him. So that's what he grew up doing his whole life, is building cars and being Walker's crew chief. Well, Walker retired in 2000, and they started their business, which is Walker Evans Racing, where my dad and Walker became partners in the business. And what they do now is their main business is they're an OE manufacturer of shocks for Polaris. They do just about 300,000 shocks a year now, and they're a huge OE supplier as well as aftermarket suppliers. So they're also doing off-road racing wheels. So that's where that kind of tied into me starting to race. I came about 10, 11, 12 years old, and I'd always grew up riding dirt bikes. My mom hated it. My mom's a school teacher, and she's kind of out towards the country, and she's always had kids come in with broken arms and broken legs, and just known kids that have passed away from bad accidents. And she would let me ride, but I could never race. And I was getting to the age where I wanted to do something competitive. I was in baseball, and I wanted to just do something motorsports wise. And my dad works right by a go-kart track called Adams Motorsports Park. And when I was a kid, I would come help him on the summers and stuff like that. He'd put me to work, and I'd put shocks together, and he'd keep me busy. So we drive by Adams every day because I wasn't old enough to have my driver's license, so I'd have to go to and from work with him. So we drive by this place, and I finally talked my dad into getting a go-kart. And my very first race car, I think he bought for $600. It was down there. It was like the cheapest, easiest thing to do, and we would maybe race, I don't know, a couple times a year. It was nothing serious, but my dad ended up getting a go-kart. My uncles got a go-kart, and we'd more just go do it for fun as a family. They'd grown up racing. All my uncles were involved in off-road, and it was something cool, even though it was a lot simpler than going out and doing anything major. So we'd go down to Adams go-kart track, and I'll drive go-karts, and I started racing them and started getting more competitive and moved up the ranks a little bit. And by the time I was 14, I was racing somewhat competitively. We'd race probably every Saturday or every other Saturday, and I was having fun doing it, but it wasn't like something I was head over heels for. And a thing called the trophy cart came out, and I went to a core race with my dad, and that was like the coolest thing ever, because here we go to an off-road race. I hadn't been to one since I was 5 or 6 years old. Core was making a strong comeback. They were out at Chula Vista, and my dad's walking around to all these different race teams, and everyone knows my dad and is saying, "Hey, Randy, what have you been up to?" And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. You know, my dad's the man right now. And they had these trophy carts out there, and it was basically kids my age in an off-road go-kart.
Yeah.
And I literally kicked and pushed and did whatever I could to try to talk my dad into one. And one day I walked into a shop to go to work, and there was one sitting there. And he ended up getting a trophy cart, and we did that for a year, raced trophy carts, and it was a fun deal. But it was brand new. I mean, it was this kind of a circus back then, the very first year. So I had a good time doing that, and that's right when Polaris came out with the Razor. So My dad had been doing
Yeah.
business with Polaris, but it was all on the snowmobile side. He was actually making snowmobile shocks out of
Okay.
Southern California. He's making snowmobile shocks for
Yeah.
Polaris. And so they have this Razor, and Rhino racing had kind of come big. They were at local motocross tracks, and it was starting to grow, and Polaris was kind of interested in doing some racing stuff. So my dad bought a Razor through them, and some of the engineers, my dad knew a lot of the engineers, so some of them crossed over at the time, and they were helping us with just a couple setup stuff, and just started racing that. And that's kind of where my career took a turn. Is I was now part of a factory deal. I'd put some good finishes together, and they didn't have many guys on the team. They had a couple guys, couple teams, and they were trying to spread. They were trying to grow in the racing world. Yamaha was winning, and they wanted to be a part of racing. So they knew where my dad had come from, and they trusted that we were going to take it the right direction. So I got a factory deal back when I was, I think, about 17, 18, racing Razors on the short course series. It was Lucas Oil at the time. And I went on to win a couple championships, and that's kind of where my career took a turn for, people were now starting to notice. The side-by-side community was starting to blow up. I was sponsored by one of the main manufacturers, Polaris, who at the time completely rejuvenated the industry. I mean, it had gone from a Rhino, which was a field, you could drive around your field at 35, to now this Razor was the very first sport vehicle. And I was one of the ones heading the racing for it. So I started gaining all these sponsors like K&N and all these guys that were involved with racing. And at the same time, my dad already had all of these connections through racing for 35 years with Walker. So there was a bunch of guys like South Point Casino and FK Roddins and all kinds of these little guys that all my dad had to do was call, and he's like, "Hey, this is my kid's doing." And they're like, "Hell yeah, we're down to help." Anything we could do to be a part of the program, let's do it. So that's kind of where I had my very first push start, is from where my dad came from and the reputation he built for himself. I didn't have to try to sell myself right away because they trusted in my dad and they knew who he was and where he came from. So that's kind of where my very big first push came from.
Oh, that's awesome. And one thing that we've talked about in this show a number of times, because there actually are a lot of folks that have grown up in the industry, right? Whether it's their parents or their friends, or they have connections, and that helps them get started. But there's a double-edged sword with that. It's a nice start, but it also means high expectations, and it's hard sometimes to maintain those expectations. You can get your foot in the door, like someone can get help wedge the door open for you, but you have to finish opening it, walk through, and stay on the other side, and that could be tough too. And I just think that I always like to reinforce that in the show, because we've had people that have started where like their parents had no idea what racing was all about, and then they were able to be successful. And then there's the opposite side where parents have the idea. But either way, you have to work hard, and you have to maintain that consistency over time.
Oh yeah, and my dad was, anyone that's ever known my dad or met him, he's definitely not an easy sale. So if I wasn't doing my job, aside from the racetrack, whether it was at home or whatever, there was no racing for me. And at the same time, he came from winning and being at the top of off-road racing for years and years and years. And there was no way he was going to go out there and let me just run around in 10th and not care and not want to do good and have fun. If it was just a hobby to me at the time and I didn't really show my time and interest in it, he would have just pulled the plug faster than he could have put it into place.
Definitely. Well, that's good stuff, though. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about where you're at today. You got a lot going on right now, so I want you to kind of highlight some of the things you're really fired up about today.
Yeah, so I mean, that story kind of accelerated over the last 5 years. A lot of it to do with the videos I've done and the racing I've done and the results I've been able to pull. So right now in 2018, I'm basically at the top two levels of short course off-road racing. I race a Pro 4 as well as a Pro 2. I race in both classes of the Lucas Oil off-road racing series. I do some racing in a Razor still. My schedule doesn't allow me to do as much nowadays, but I still do race it every now and then, as well as this year we've actually started a new video series. So it's not that X21K is over, but it's a little bit of a just different branch off. It's called Vision, And it's a 4-part series that we're doing this year. We've already launched our first one, which was called Snowblind, which we did with a legendary snowboarder, Torstein Horgmo. So that was a fun project. It's kind of just, like you said earlier, everyone wants to know what's next, and there's always these big stunts and jumps and vehicles that we're supposed to build and all these things. And we just kind of wanted to take a year and do this 4-part series, and I just wanted to have fun, and I think that this video series we're doing called Visions it's my vision. It's what I think of when I want to go out and ride and have fun and just not be so serious all the time. And I think that it portrays through our films and what's to come, that I think it makes people want to get out and ride and drive and do all these things, because they can see that it's fun through the video. And now it's kind of the point with these videos and what we're doing this year.
That's really good. I'm actually reading a book right now. I talked about this on my last live show too, but it's called Start With Why, and it was written by Simon Sinek. And it's about like the emotional side of decision making and how people are drawn to the why you do things versus the what or the how. And I love what you just said there, because a lot of what is linked to your why is captured in a vision. What's your vision for the industry? What's your vision for yourself and your life? And when you're living that why and people can see it and they can connect with it, like that's when you get a true tribe or a true following. People are absolutely dedicated to you because they believe what you believe. And if your content can capture what you believe and they can experience that, then it just builds like a really solid relationship, which sponsors love, right? And consumers love.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that's the main goal, is sometimes we get so caught up in these videos and trying to make the best video that we'll look at it sometimes and be like, what are we doing? This isn't fun. This is brutal. And when we're just out there and sometimes having fun and I'm just freestyling and people and the film guys will be like, dude, do that again, Yeah. And that's kind of what this video series is about, is just taking all the fun things I've always wanted to do and I can dream up in my mind and just go and do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that definitely comes across through video.
That's perfect. Well, that was a good background, a good synopsis. What I want to talk about next, though, is who your current partners are. Just kind of go through the gamut of the people that you partner with, the people that you focus your energy on.
Yeah, so obviously I brought up the Polaris Razor partnership, so that's been great for me over the past few years, and through what I've been able to do with them and through my racing, I've been able to partner with Rockstar Energy, which is another one of my main sponsors. So they're my two that I go to, the two that if I really want to do a project, if I really want to go to a certain race, they're my two guys that I'm like, hey, that's who I got to get fired up about it first, So those are my two go-to guys, and from there on, I have South Point, who, like I said before, has been basically one of my longest sponsors through my relationship with my dad, who owns Walker Evans Racing, which is also a sponsor of mine. I run all their products on all my vehicles. BF Goodrich Tires, they're one of the best in the industry, and that's always something that I look to do, is partner with some people that are the best in the industry, and I strongly believe that they are one of those brands. BF Goodrich, K&N Filters, Rigid Industries Lighting, Rockford Fosgate. Those are some of my big ones that I work with very closely as of right now.
Oh, that's perfect. It's very interesting when you start seeing the brands that partner together, right? You start seeing some trends, and I love that. I've seen it with this show and some of the sponsors of this show, and how they've linked up with people who are followers of the show. And, you see other people partnering up too, like you'll see the Rigids partner up with folks, you see Razor with folks, and it's really cool to see how the sponsor relationships build off of one another. Like you said, if you do a project with Polaris, Rockstar is going to have to be in some way involved, right? Because they're going to recognize your name, and that's going to have some net effect on them. So if you do a horrible job, which is unlikely, but if you do a horrible job, it might have a negative impact on Rockstar. If you do an amazing job, then it has a positive impact on Rockstar. And I just think that's really cool how all these relationships just start forming. It creates like this intricate web.
Yeah, totally. And I've been really lucky there where I've been able to even start with some of my partners that weren't necessarily working with each other or were working with competitors of my sponsors, and been able to like get them to get behind what we're doing, and every one of my sponsors has jumped on board, and that's one thing I'm really lucky about is all my sponsors are. I'm really, really lucky to have all of them, and they always support me 110%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I've learned a lot about in this show. We talked a little bit in the pre-interview about I've done almost. I think this is going to be in like episode 95 by the time I release it. I've done all these episodes, and you'd think that I would actually know what I'm doing by now, or I'd actually be able to talk about this stuff competently. But there's just so many new things that come in, so many variables. It's very confusing, and that's why I love continue to talk about it, because it is a challenge and it is complicated. But one of the things that I've really picked up on is how the sponsor relationships, that web, it can be delicate, but also it can be one of the strongest things that you have behind you. So I just want to share a quick example. In the one of the previous episodes, I had David McKinney on from 509. He's a creative marketing manager, and 509, it's big in the snowmobile industry, and it's breaking into off-road industry. But they started making gear, so snowmobile gear. Well, last year, HMK USA, who also makes great snow gear, they came on as one of my sponsors, and they've been, my gear sponsor for my sleds. And I had the opportunity to interview someone from 509, and I basically called up the guy who owns HMK, which is Kirk Zach, and I was like, hey, Kirk, man, like I got an opportunity to interview someone from 509. That means I'm going to actually be publishing an episode where one of your competitors is on there. I was like, what do you think about that, man? I said, I won't do it if you're not comfortable. And I thought he was going to say, yeah, that's I don't think so. And I would have been totally okay with that. He said, no, that sounds great. We all need to grow together as an industry. So bring them on, do what you can. And that's where like that web can be a very big support structure too. And I'm grateful to have folks like that to be partnered with. I mean, that to me just says that he trusts me to help his business and also help the industry.
Oh no, honestly, obviously, and that you take something away from that too. Is next time you go out of your way to do something for HMK, because he had your back. So I always fully believe it's a full circle. If he would have said no, you might have just been a little sour about it, or moved on with life, and taken it for what it is. But I think those things always help grow your relationship for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what I want to do actually is we're going to take a quick break to thank the sponsors for this podcast, and then we're going to come back and hammer out some details around sponsorship tactics and strategies. I am going to give you access to a giveaway put on by SolderWeld, which is going to allow you to go with one other person for free to the 2018 Vegas to Reno race. That's the longest off-road desert race in America. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be podcasting there. It's a cool place. You need to be there too. All right? This is what you need to do. Go out and buy some SolderWeld hot block heat absorption putty. Buy it. Then take a picture of you with that putty. Then take that picture, post it online to Facebook or Instagram with the hashtag. So this can be hashtag HotBlock4Vets. That's HOTBLOCK 4 VETS. HotBlock4, the number 4 Vets. And that's it. You have until the end of July to enter this contest. So I highly encourage you to do it. Worst case scenario, you get a fantastic product in SolderWeld's Hot Block Putty. Check it out. I don't know about you, but I absolutely can't stand cleaning the mud, filth, grime, goo, garbage off my machines after I go for a ride. It's just frustrating. It takes a lot of time. That's why I'm going to talk to you about Armor Coat next. Armor Coat is designed to help prevent mud, clay, ice, and other grime from sticking to your machine. It makes the cleanup quick and easy. It makes the machine actually look fantastic, and beyond that, it smells phenomenal. I don't know how to describe it, like bubble gum or something like that. It smells great. If you want to know more about Armor Coat, visit armorcoatproducts.com, and you will see their entire product line, all the offerings. Armor Coat is also working on some new stuff. They're soon going to release a solution made for coating the helmet and visor, and also one for wheels to help prevent mud buildup for high temp areas. So make your move now. Go to armorcoatproducts.com. Make a decision that's going to allow you to shorten the amount of time that you spend cleaning so that you can increase the amount of time that you spend riding and racing. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. I hear it constantly from racers that a good suspension setup is absolutely critical for performance, and that's why I'm going to talk to you next about bold racing and suspension. Now, it's really critical to understand your suspension, and there's so many intricacies with the valving and the shims and all this crazy equipment that you need to actually rebuild and properly set up your suspension, that it's really important, if you're ready for that next level of performance, to partner with an awesome suspension company. Now, Bold Racing is that company. They're not only specialists with their suspension setups, but they also partner with companies that produce amazing custom components. And on top of that, they're a family race team. They actually race themselves, so they really understand the type of beating that your vehicle and your shocks can take. So what I want you to do is give them a call and just chat with them. Talk to them about suspension. Their number is 702-506-5354. If you're not ready for a phone call, go ahead and shoot them an email, bold.racing@yahoo.com. I am constantly asking the guests of this podcast how they attract and retain sponsors, and on almost every single occasion, somebody gives an example of a resume. A rider or a racer resume is extremely important to your overall sponsorship pitch and proposal. And it's tough to do. I mean, it's not really the easiest thing. Anybody can go through and put together a resume, so don't get me wrong there, but it's really difficult to get something that's like unique and different and stands out, and that also is something that can be put across multiple platforms. Well, that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about next, is how topthepodium.com can actually help you build a race or rider resume that can be used on multiple platforms. I'm talking like website, PDF, something you can print off that's interactive, that looks fantastic. It looks absolutely professional. Well, that's because it's made by a professional. This is the type of thing that's going to set you apart from the crowd, and that's going to position you for a strong sponsorship proposal. So what I want you to do next is go to topthepodium.com, and if you have a question, there's a little chat icon that pops up on the side of the screen when you go to topthepodium.com, and you can go ahead and type your question right there. Jeff Vanestal, he is the owner of Top the Podium. He's going to be able to respond to you directly, so check it out. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. We are now in the meat of the podcast. This is where we get into all the good stuff, the stuff that you really came to hear. I like to build a relationship in Heat 1 where we talk about the background, and I want you to know a little bit more about RJ. I want you to know what he's experienced so that you will actually trust his advice that he gives you in this Heat and Heat 2. But RJ, what I want you to kind of do in this one to kick us off is walk us through a couple examples of how you actually built a relationship with a sponsor. So whoever you want to pick, but how did you kind of meet them? How did you form a relationship, and how did it blossom into whatever it is today?
Yeah, no, I think that's a question that I frequently get asked, and everyone always just wants to walk up to a sponsor and say, "Give me this dollar amount," and that's just unfortunately how this world does not work. So I've learned that the hard way as well, and I think that's part of learning. But I'd say one example is when I was coming up and I started my own off-road team, and I was 20 years old. And I started my team RJ37, and I was going to race Pro 2 for my first year. And I'd been racing for a little bit now. I'd been racing for other teams. I'd done my own thing a little bit, but this was my first time going out my own. 20 years old, and I'm trying to gain as much money as I can because I have to buy a semi, an awning, a truck, all these things. And I'm trying to put these numbers together on something that I don't really know. I understand it, but I don't really know how much this all costs. And I'm trying to put it together. I have my title sponsors, but I'm trying to put the rest of it into place. And a big thing in off-road racing is your tire. That's what when racing in dirt, and your tire gives you your traction, or it goes flat if you hit a rock. It's one of the most important things in off-road racing, I do believe. And so when approaching tire sponsors, I was a good item for a tire sponsor. I'm young. A lot of guys in off-road racing, I had what a lot of the tire sponsors were looking for. I was young. I had results. I had this UTV thing that all the tire companies were interested in being a part of. And I had some pretty big offers that were, I'd never even seen that much money on paper before. And I luckily I had some people in my corner that talked to me and were like, "Hey, don't get caught up in the number, remember why you need these tires. It's more than just a paycheck. It's one of your main lifelines." And I ended up going and signing with BF Goodrich, who was probably my lowest end offer out of 3 or 4 offers. I think they were the lowest end offer, but they were like, "We have the best tire." And I didn't know. I had to just take their word and take the results of what I was seeing on the track. And to this day, I think that was one of my best decisions I've made in the last 5 years, was going with them, because I could have taken a dollar amount for more money at the time, but one, was it going to last? And two, if I didn't have the results right away, I could have lost all my other main sponsors. Yeah. So that was one of those things where I just relied on, I knew that the brand BF Goodrich was strong, and I've looked at what they've been in racing and what they've done for racing and all of these things. And I had all these other offers that were trying to make it sound like they had that all beat and covered and they had a better tire. And at the end of it, I'm glad I stuck with my gut, and I had some good people behind me that were saying, "Hey, this is what I think you should do." And that's one of those situations where I got more by taking less, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. We've talked about this in the past in the show about, going with the products that you truly believe in. But what we have never really talked about is how making that decision could impact the rest of your program. So I love what you just said there, in that if you would have made a poor choice and went with a tire that didn't perform to your expectations, it could have actually changed the course of your career. And it could have impacted the other sponsorships in a negative way. So that's something that I don't think we've really ever touched on. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, if you're out there and it's expensive, these trucks, 900 horsepower trucks, they can get expensive really, really quick. And to lose my main sponsors over a tire deal was just not something that I could afford to do. I at the time I needed the money. I financed my race truck. The guy I bought it through, he let me make payments on it every month for the first, I think it was 8 months. So I literally financed my my race truck at 20 years old, and I needed the money. I needed the money just because that's the way contracts work. You don't get it all up front. So I didn't have the money right away to fund my program and to do what I needed to do. So at the time I was kind of mad. I wanted to go with the money, but I stuck with my gut, and to this day, I mean, they backed me 110%, and now they're a part of our video projects, and they've taken me all around the world, and it's definitely the best decision I could have made.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very good. It's a great example. What about another one? Do you have another example of a sponsorship relationship that you've built?
Yes, I mean, I always think you got to look at the big term. I guess I can use Polaris as an example, or I guess I could use Rockstar as an example. I was actually sponsored by a competing drink back in the day, and I'd gone through ups and downs and working with them, and I knew what was cool about it. I knew they were a cool brand, and I actually got approached by Rockstar saying, hey, if you have time, would like to meet up and talk to you about some sponsorship. And so we did, and at first they weren't sure where to start, and they wanted me to kind of go one way with my career, and I was like, oh, this is kind of where I see myself going, and it kind of ended as, okay, that's not going to work, and they came back and were like, okay, well, how do we make this work? And I saw that they wanted it, they wanted me to be a part of their program, and I somehow didn't see it like that at first. I thought, hey, I don't know where this is going. I might just be a filler, and I don't want to bounce around, I don't want to be that guy that bounces around, and I want my people like my partners like Polaris and stuff to be pumped on, and I want people that are going to be a part of my video projects and all these things. And I wasn't sure if that's where they were going to be, and they gave me their word that they would, and they've been another partner that I'd hope I never have to separate ways with them ever in my career. I mean, they've been the coolest people to work with. They understand. They love the lifestyle. They've been 110%, not just behind now what I do, but also behind my sponsors events. They now come out to Camp Razors, and they activate and stuff out there. And we've done rides together with Polaris, and it's been so awesome. And so that's just one of those things that what I took out for it is they were persistent. They started with something that what direction they wanted to go. They listened to me and where I wanted to go, and they adapted their deal, and they said, okay, let's do this. And I was pretty surprised. I was taken back by it. And it's I think what I took from it is if they show that they're willing to give and take, it's one of those give and takes. You can't just, it's easy to see the amount of money and do things their way and just fall for it. And then 6 months down the road, you look at it and you're like, you're frustrated. This isn't what I wanted to be doing, but you committed to it, and I've done that before, and it just doesn't work. So I was happy with what happened, and it's been a great partner for me.
Yeah, I want to try to dive more into that, the moment where you actually said, I don't think this is going to work for me. That's got to be tough, especially when it's someone like Rockstar who has such a good name in the industry. I mean, how did that feel? How did you handle that when you actually decided to say, nah, I don't think this is right? I mean, it worked out in the end, but like at that moment, you didn't know if it was going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I just didn't know. I didn't know all the details. We weren't talking officially. We just met for a dinner at first, and they'd kind of said some things that they wanted me to do in the direction that they thought I was going. And obviously they have to look for themselves. They're a very powerful, strong company, and they have to think about what's best for their brand and where it's headed. And I think that's finally when they went back and they thought that I would be good for their brand. And now as being a part of the brand, there's not one that could fit me better, I don't think. So, just that moment of it's hard when you can see a dollar amount on the line and you want to do it, and you just are too nervous to do it. And it's one of those things where, you have to think of everyone else that's helped you and everyone else that's backed you. And is it going to be okay with them? Are they cool with it? Are they going to support it? Is it something that they're going to be stoked on, And all of those things happened when I signed with Rockstar. So it was a win-win for everyone.
That's perfect. Well, you've been with Rockstar for a little while now, and BF Goodrich and a number of your other sponsors. So one of the things that I wanted to better understand from you is how you maintain those relationships. I mean, do you have any tips or advice for how you can keep those going year after year?
Yeah, I think one thing that's maybe misunderstood and some people doesn't make sense of is you always have to over deliver. You sign up for one thing, but you have to kind of know going into it that it's going to include a little bit more, you know. And that's just what it is. There's times where you lean on your sponsor and like, hey, I really want to do this, and they didn't originally plan on that, but they're like, all right, we'll support you, you know. And so that's one of those things is I always believe in over delivering. You know, maybe on my contract it says, hey, you have to do 3 signings for us this year. And there's going to be a time where they call you and you've already done 3 and it's number 4 and you just do it. You know, it's not something where you charge them a bunch of money to go do because they've had your back and they're going to have your back. But when you start doing stuff like that, you just burn them out. And I've had sponsors like that the other way around though, that weren't really offering money. There's just some products and they just eventually ask. And I'm like, hey man, like, I like working with you, but at some point I'd rather just buy the product and not have to deal with this. You know, there's those 2 lines, but as far as a successful partnership goes, I always believe in over delivering, but not selling yourself short at the same time. It happens a lot in our space where people with a lot of money just from their own personal businesses get involved in racing, and maybe they have a spot on their vehicle that's worth $50,000. Someone comes in, offers them 5, and they do $100,000 worth of work for them.
Yeah.
And one of those things that we see it all the time, it hurts our industry because off-road's still growing from what I see. And when stuff like that happens, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for guys like me that make their living doing this, because now when I try to go to sell a $100,000 spot, these guys are laughing at me because they're like, why? I could get it for 5. Even though you can't do it for 5, you know? So that's always one frustrating thing that I've had to deal with in my career is knowing when to ask and when to just say, all right, well, I'm not doing this for 5. So you always have to hold your ground and keep building with what you have.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the more challenging aspects of this industry is valuation of what you're actually worth and what your time is actually worth, what you can deliver. You know, I've referenced this book on here a number of times, but Alex Stryler, he works for Lucas Oil. He wrote a book, Motorsports Marketing and Sponsorships, and he has a couple of chapters dedicated to valuations. But one thing that book doesn't necessarily get into, and it's become a bigger issue over time, is what you just mentioned, where, you know, if people don't necessarily know their value or they undervalue themselves, it does put the other racers at a little bit of it puts them in a hot spot. And gosh, I don't have an answer to that right now. That is tough. That's tough.
Yeah, it is a hard space, and it's just one of those things that I don't think will ever go away, you know, because people want to be cool. They want to have sponsors, even if they're paying for it themselves. You know, they want to look cool. They want their buddies to think that they aren't paying for it themselves, you know, and it's one of those things that's not going to go away, but it's the people that can avoid it. And when they do, it's those guys, I think, that are going to keep helping this thing grow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And hopefully, you know, if you are in that situation and, you know, you're being compared to somebody who is, maybe they're doing the extra work, but they're not really valuing themselves the same, and you're competing against that person, you just got to, like you said, over deliver. If there's something else that you can do that they're not doing, you know, you can showcase that. That's my best recommendation right now.
Oh yeah, totally. No, and it's one of those things that I've always heard it from people like, oh, well, they don't pay me to do that, when it's like, well, you're actually getting paid to represent their brand. So whatever it takes to represent the brand as well as you can, you have to do whatever it takes. And sometimes that's something I've had to learn sometimes the hard way. Just, I think more so because I'm young and I had no business background, no nothing. I came out of high school and started racing. And the saying it takes money to make money is fully true, that sometimes you have to put money into places where it doesn't make sense for, in the long run, it to come all back around full circle.
Yeah, and it's definitely a balance too when you're first getting started. from what you were saying before, you're like, wow, shoot, is it even worth the effort at this point, or should I just buy this product, right? Because a lot of people do start off with that discount, and yeah, you got to make. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to be able to give you the exact advice in that one, but you're going to have to evaluate case by case. What's the long-term outlook look like with this business versus the short-term? If short-term, you are truly just trying to get 25% off of something, and you're really going to put in more work than it's worth, then maybe it's not the right deal. But if you're looking at it as, I don't care about the 25% off, I'm looking at 5 years down from the road what this is going to mean for my career. That's a different story. So you have to evaluate those situations yourself and figure out, is it worth the effort for the short term? Is it worth the effort for the long term? Which one are you focused on? Which one's the sponsor focused on? And just make a call.
Yeah, totally. And I think always sometimes too is, it doesn't hurt to ask someone. Tell them what you're about to do, and if it's someone you trust and someone that and they tell you that you're stupid for doing it, it might be a bad idea.
Yeah, it does not hurt to ask. And it sounds kind of obvious, but when you're in a situation, whether if it's a business meeting or just talking casually with the sponsor, there are things that you might feel embarrassed to bring up. You might feel that you're going to look stupid if you say it, or you're going to look like you really don't know what you're talking about if you ask the question. But odds are, if you're confused about something, they might be too. So ask that question and try to clarify. If you want to know what they're thinking for 5 years down the road, ask them, hey, what's your plan? Where would you see this thing going 5 years down the road from now? Okay. Now you've got a conversation started. But it can feel weird asking that stuff sometimes.
Oh yeah, totally. And that's one thing I can say too is have an answer. I think a lot of times that conversation is going to be flipped right on you. Is when you walk into a meeting, the sponsor is going to ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you have to be able to tell them. So,
yeah, I recommend this for anybody, but I think it adds value if you're interviewing for a new job or putting together a sponsorship proposal or whatever. But I highly recommend people put together some sort of personal mission statement and a vision statement. So vision is like your why, your purpose, what you want to do in the future ultimately. And then your mission is like what you're doing, how you do these things. But I highly recommend you sit down and go through an exercise. You can Google it. There's resources out there that walk you through it. It sounds silly, but if you want to be prepared for that question, do that exercise. Like, just do it. Figure out what your personal mission is, your personal vision. Get it out there. When they ask, you've got the answer.
I think that's a good idea.
Plus, just to build on that, like, you can compare your vision and your mission to whatever their company is, and then you can decide quicker if it's actually a good fit or not.
Right. I've sat on the other end of the table and been asked that question and not had the answer, and you feel definitely way more stupid than if you've just done the research. I can tell you that from experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've all been there. I know I've been there from like a job interview standpoint, but I'll tell you what, if you do want to blow people away, have that stuff ready. Like, here's my vision. This is what I live for. This is my purpose. I mean, if you look at some of the most like impactful people who have ever walked this planet, they all have that vision. I mean, for example, like Bill Gates, I think his vision was, a PC at everybody's home. All right, that when he first started in the 70s, that was crazy.
Yeah.
But like now, I'm sitting here, I'm doing this recording. I got like 4 PCs right in front of me, basically. I mean, it's crazy. In almost any large scale entrepreneur has some sort of very clear vision that if you talk to them, it's very clear. So like, why not you? Why can't you have that same type of mentality?
Yep, I'm with you on that 100%.
Oh, that's good. Well, one thing that I need to touch on is if you've ever run into a time, and you don't have to get into details around who it is, but if you ran into a time where things didn't go well with a sponsor, and ultimately I want people to basically get some lessons learned out of that experience.
Yeah, so I guess one way I could go with this is the easiest thing for me, since I was already on the tire kick, is tires is an easy thing. When you sign a contract, you have to know that you've committed to them, and that it doesn't matter if you're racing a Razor and someone walks up to you and asks you to drive their trophy truck and it has a competing tire company, then you can't do it, And I think I had a problem with that when I was younger, because I was doing kind of that juggle. I was doing some truck stuff, and I was growing in the UTV industry, and I was racing truck stuff, and I had basically 3 different segments where I needed tires for my Razor for racing. I needed tires for my video for companies that could help promote and push and put money towards our video series we were trying to go. And then I was racing trucks, and I needed tires for that as well. And there's really no good way to do that. Nowadays, yes, you can find it. Like BF Goodrich, for example, is the perfect company for me. But at the time, there was no company the UTV tires were basically ATV tire that was a bigger size, or the tire companies couldn't keep up. The companies that were trying to make them, the manufacturers were making the cars so much better every single year that they could not keep up for a little bit there. So now in 2018, it's not quite like that. But for a while there, I was in a really tough predicament where I'm trying to sign deals for my race team, and knowing that, hey, if I got a new opportunity in my truck, I need to take it. So it was kind of that type of thing where don't sign something, or at least put it out there and communicate off the get-go. Like, hey, just so you know, I have this other truck thing, or if I get an opportunity to go drive a truck with a competing tire, like, just know where they stand. It's going to be a yes or a no answer, and it's one of those things to get out on the line right away. And I guess one time where I messed that up wasn't necessarily for my own sake. I always did well about asking and knowing right away that, the honesty is key there. And if you don't hide it and you tell them what you're doing, it's easier that way. But one time I had another competitor come up to me who was on a competing tire, and they came up to me and said, hey, can I have a set of your used tires? And I was like, well, like, what do you mean, a set of my used tires? And he's like, oh, I went and talked to your sponsor, and they said they didn't care if you gave me a set of tires. I'm going to try them out because next year I'm going to switch to their company. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't really care. Technically, the tires are mine. I'm giving them through sponsorship, and I guess if they said you could have them, you could have them. And I didn't communicate that, and I just said, okay, like, you could use my used tires, no big deal. Well, it turns out that competitor raced on those tires, did well. I think ended up in 3rd place. And as he was pulling off the track, he went into the pits and changed his tires back to his other sponsor.
No kidding.
And went up to the podium. And so they ended up approaching, they saw what had happened. They ended up approaching the driver, and he told him that he got the tires from me, and they came up to me and were like, what happened here? And I told them, and they were like, well, that's not true. And it was definitely a quick learning life lesson for me. I was young and just getting involved, and I learned real quick that I'd made a mistake, and that I didn't communicate. And even though what I did wasn't anything necessarily out of contract, it was just ethically wrong. And
yeah, that's weird.
And that's something that lasts, like a sponsor sees that, and it leaves an impression on them of what had happened. And it was a bad impression. And that was one thing where it's definitely a unique case, but it was something where I made sure that I didn't let ever happen again. And I learned just for even other things, if I ever have a product given to me, that I know what I can do with it. And if not, at least ask what you can do with it from there on.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good story. I didn't know where it was going there for a minute. I thought maybe he was going to, pop a tire and then blame it on the company. But, wow, that's very interesting. And I guess it goes to show you too that contracts can't cover everything, and you're not going to be able to predict all the things that a sponsor might not appreciate. You're going to have to use the gut check. You're going to have to use the the sanity check every now and then. And also, you're probably going to make a mistake, and you might not even know it at the time, right? In this case, you had no idea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I didn't at the time. I just didn't think about it enough to think it was a really big deal. I should have known that it was a sketchy sounding deal. But I didn't really think much of it. I just thought, hey, I didn't ever think, hey, what if this guy does good and goes on TV and thanks his other sponsor? I didn't think of that at the time, so I definitely learned my lesson.
No, that's very interesting. And one thing that I wanted to bring up too, when you were talking about how you could have some conflicts with sponsorship, and I think it is important to vet those things out. Like, let's say, for example, you were talking about you might hop into another vehicle and that other vehicle has, a General Tire on it. If you can vet that out with BF Goodrich ahead of time, maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. At least you draw the line and you have that information. AMSOIL came on as the title sponsor for this show a couple months back, and one of the things that we had to vet out was, what if I bring somebody on the show that is sponsored by, a competing oil company, right? I mean, there's Lucas Oils out there, and there's Quaker States, and there's tons of them, right? And it's very possible that as I bring people on the show, that they're going to be sponsored by somebody else. I actually just had Megan Meyer was on the live show. Just actually, for people listening, it's July 10th right now, and we recorded that live on July 9th. And Megan Meyer's a top alcohol racer, and she's sponsored by Lucas Oil. And I was like, I knew ahead of time that it was AMSOIL and I had agreed that I could bring people on the show that were competing oil companies. But obviously, they couldn't sponsor me, but I could bring them on the show. We had that agreement, and it made it so easy to actually plan that episode because I didn't have to worry about it. We had already vetted that out ahead of time.
Yep, totally. Yeah, it comes down to communication is key. Even sometimes when it's more work than you think it should be, you still have to go out of your way to make sure that you're not going to make them unhappy.
Right. And one thing that we did, Megan and I just talked about before we did the show, part of my logo has AMSOIL, the logo, built into it. What I did for Megan's show, I gave her a separate thumbnail to use for promotion of the event that no longer had that logo built into it, because if she's going to put it up on social media, she can't have something saying AMSOIL on it when she's sponsored by Lucas Oil. So it's very little, it's very minor, but hopefully details like that are going to make her more successful in the long term, and hopefully are going to make our sponsors more successful in the long term.
Yeah, exactly. It's something little like that her just posting about being on a podcast is not worth losing her whole entire sponsorship over, and it could come down to that on these kind of days in social media.
Definitely. So yeah, I did want to talk about social media because it is such an important part of what we do nowadays, whether you're a podcaster or you're a lawn care company or you're, an off-road racer. It's become very important. So I'd love if you have some strategies that you'd like to share with us around how you kind of plan your social media. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest things about social media, and I'm sure people say it nonstop on this show, is the easiest thing is to be yourself. It's hard we see all these other people and we see them being successful, and it's easy to think, like, what does that guy have that I don't have? Like, how does this guy have 300,000 followers? Or how does this guy have 4 million followers? Like, he's not that cool, or she's not that cool, or, I think it's easier to make those judgments, but really those judgments are just a waste of time. You don't know what they've done to get there or anything like that. And for me, I just go about it my own way. I know, I've learned, I guess, over time on who my kind of audience is and where I want to go with my life. And at the end of the day, if I'm doing what I want to do and going the direction I want to go, I don't ever have to explain it to my sponsors because they know, they see my social media and they get it. I've earned sponsors because of social media and what I've been able to do. And And I've never been the guy that pays and just promotes on social media. I let it kind of go natural. I think that I'm not going to buy 10,000 followers just to have some fake likes on my account, because I want my people to be engaged. I want my people that are following me to actually go out and buy a Razor, to go out and buy a Rockstar, to go out and buy, these tires. I don't having a bigger number and not selling any products for my sponsors or making myself, gain any followers in the long run doesn't do anything for me. So I definitely use Instagram as my main social tool. I think for what I do, for the video wise and photo wise, it's been my strength. I tie into Facebook through that as well as Twitter, but that's always my main go-to. I've tried the vlog thing out as of recently, and it's fun, and it's funny. You see who your core is. I have guys and sponsors that love it. People like seeing the behind the scenes. They like seeing, hey, maybe not every time is it cool to watch RJ go around the track. We already know how he did. We don't need to see a recap video, but when they can see into your life and see your personality and see how fun it is to be you and how I just love my job, they kind of buy into that. It's fun for them to watch. You see it with all these vlog kids now across the world. I mean, there's little kids, and I've watched some of them, and I'm like, I can't even make it through it. It's the stupidest thing. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. And somehow, but they figured it out. They've reached their target audiences, and they've gained a following. And that's what it is when the people find what you're good at and what you do, and they latch onto it, and you post something that starts to get a lot of likes. Every time that happens, you see who your core audience is, and you just have to keep building on that, and do things and spend your money and time other ways, do videos for certain holidays, and do all these little things that, you can give to your sponsors, and they could post for you, and you do the work. You send a photo to your sponsor, you send the video to your sponsor and say, hey, here's my recap, and they can post it or not post it, but at least you did the work. You sent it to them. If they post it, then it's more eyes, that's free marketing right there. So that's always something I've done, is just, send them a link over or send them something, and whether they use it or not, it is what it is, but at least you went and did your part.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you said be yourself on social media, or I guess in general, but I know it's come up on the show a billion times, and it's going to keep coming up, and I hope that it keeps coming up because it's something that needs to be reinforced. And I'm just going to go back to what I mentioned earlier. I'm going to kind of beat this dead horse. The personal mission statement, the vision statement, anything that you can do to better understand yourself is going to help with that. Because if you get caught up trying to emulate somebody else too closely, like doing exactly what RJ does, you're not going to come off as, what's the word? You know what I'm talking about. What's the word? That word, Yeah,
it's just not unique. It's not, it's not fresh.
Genuine.
Genuine.
Man, I needed a shovel to dig in that one out. You're not going to come across as genuine if you're trying to copy somebody else. And like I said, it sounds simple, but it's so hard to do. If you go back and listen to some of the first shows I've done with this, like, you could tell I was trying to I wasn't me. My voice was like falsely deep, like fake deep. I don't know what I was doing, but, and, I don't know. It just wasn't me at all. I tend to like bounce around a little bit more in my real life, and I get excited about things that other people don't get excited about. And that's just how I am. And but once I started letting that stuff get out there and get more comfortable, I feel like my audience has responded more positively as well. Same with the live videos. Like my first live video, I was really nervous, and now I'm like, in my last one, I'm taking off my shoe and like I play a little toy guitar in one of them, and like that's more me. That's more me.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're all guilty of it at some point. I mean, that's just that's what social media has done to the generation nowadays. Is you get caught, looking up to all these people, and if you just look at your segment of someone you look up to, of where you want to be and where you're headed, they're probably goofy or different or something like that. It's just a fact that's that's what social media latches onto, is they pick up on personalities and people. And when you're not yourself, there's nothing for them to pick up on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then I did want to quick pull out one other thing that you mentioned too, and that was around comparing yourself to others. There's a quote that I like to say, and that's, compare and despair. So basically, if you continuously compare yourself to others, especially on social media, which is the highlight reel of people's lives, if you compare yourself, there's always going to be somebody else that's doing whatever it is that you want to do, and it can kick your butt if you focus on that too much. You need to be focused on being better than you were yesterday, not better than somebody you just saw on social media.
Oh yeah, totally. That's always something I go by as well, is when people talk about what the best day of their life and whatever. I always say tomorrow's the best day of your life. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
People look at me like they've never heard it before. I'm like,
yeah,
that is what it is though. Like we all make mistakes. We all have done things like that, but it's how you regroup and how you keep on keeping on.
Right,
I get to show dirt line in there, can I?
Yes. I don't think we've had one of those before. So, yes.
Perfect.
Well, I do want to quickly just ask maybe one main question around mindset in the main event. So it's going to be a condensed main event, and that's really around one. I don't know. This question I like because it gets them a little bit off kilter. So we'll see how you're going to respond to it. If you could sponsor any athlete in the world, just one, who would you choose and why?
Oh man, I think the key word in that for me is athlete, and I guess we already talked about Travis Pastrana. I think he's for especially my generation growing up, through the 90s into the early 2000s as a kid, he has been able to do it all. He's gone from being the highest level of his career in racing to basically helping start a new sport, which was freestyle motocross, being a pioneer there and dominating, to then not competing much anymore and going off to rallycross and competing there and doing well. And he was basically able to he was a professional fun haver, he liked doing all these things, and he figured out a way to succeed at it. And while he wasn't naturally good at maybe any of them, he put in the work and was able to accomplish it. And he did it all without, I think, making many waves. There's a lot of people that have come through different ups and downs in life. And as far as I know, and knowing Travis a little bit personally now, is he's a solid dude, and
yeah.
He believes he's done a lot for a lot of different action sports. And I think I look up to a lot of different action sports athletes. And as far as action sports as a category, I think he single-handedly dominates. I mean, there's no one even close, I don't think, that can touch what he's done and the different things he's done and what he's done for sports and not just himself. I think he single-handedly has a blanket on everyone by far.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I got a 2-minute interview with Travis at last year's Vegas to Reno, and it was amazing how down to earth he was. Very, actually, even just with everybody, not just with me in the interview, just him walking around and going up to babies and talking to the moms and high-fiving the dads, and just all around very personable and very down to earth. He didn't have to give me his time. Vegas to Reno he was very busy. He had a packed schedule, and for him to even spend 2 minutes with me, I thought was great. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that's just the person he is and the way he portrays himself, and why it's so easy to like him. I think it'd be hard to not like Travis Pastrana, of all the things he's accomplished in his life and done in his life. And I think that he's a good role model to people. He has had so many people look up to in life, and I think he's a good one for kids and people that want to be involved in action sports to look up to.
Definitely. I 100% agree. Well, that's awesome, RJ. This has been a great interview. I've really enjoyed the detail that you got into with your relationships that you've built. I love your example around, the problem that you ran into from a sponsorship perspective and what you learned from that. and the details around social media has been great. So I really appreciate you taking the time. But I'm going to kind of close things out now at the finish line. What I'd like to ask you now is just kind of one thing. If we had to sum it up at all, this entire conversation, one thing that you think people need to take away, what would that be?
I would say the one thing it involves the good and the bad is communication. Is when you say you're going to do something, do it, and maybe you even rise above it. And if you say you're not going to do something, don't do it. So I think communication is the number one thing for gaining sponsors, growing sponsors, and even just getting on their radar. Just talking to them and telling them what you do. And there might not be anything there, but who knows? That guy you talk to might move to another company, and now he already knows who you are. And I think that communication, if you don't ever ask, the answer is always going to be no. So communication is probably the best thing I could say to come out of this conversation with.
Definitely. I appreciate that. One thing that I just want to share with folks that I've started doing recently that has been very helpful to me from keeping up with communication and keeping up on commitments is, I actually I did a lot of research and I got an automated, maybe not automated, but like a to-do list that has, it's linked to my different devices and it's really helps me manage things. So if someone sends me a text, hey, can you shoot me an email tonight with the information for the podcast? Yeah, of course. But what if I forget? Like, it's so easy to forget that. So now I've got this little tool that I immediately put that in, and I can't forget anymore. And it has done wonders for my ability to communicate and keep my commitments. So don't feel ashamed if you're out there and you struggle to keep some commitments. Like, look for some other tools. Maybe it's a planner. Maybe it's a sticky notes. Maybe it's a tool like I've got on my planner. Whatever it is, but find ways to help yourself meet these commitments and get good, clear communication out there.
Yeah, I might need to grab that from you because my attention span nowadays seems to be about that of a gnat. So I might need to get that planner from you later on.
Yeah, okay, I'll just put it out there for people. The one I've been using is called Microsoft To Do. And you can get it on your iPhone, you can get it on your Android, you can get it on your PC, you can get it on your whatever tablet you have, and it is amazing. Like I'll put like, hey, call such and such and set a reminder at 8 p.m. and it will just come up. Game changer. So either way, you might want to look that up too. I love it.
I'm all about it. Even though I'm probably still, I'm old school. I have sitting on my desk. I have 2 computers, iPad, my phone, and 10 sticky notes and notepads full of stuff. It's all on Notepad.
Right, exactly. I get it. I completely get it. Well, hey, what's the best way, RJ, for people listening to connect with you?
Social media is the easiest and best way. I am at the RJ37 on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Just started a YouTube channel, Vlog Life. Check it out if you have time. Gonna keep trying to grow that, and from there on, you can all find all my videos on the YouTube channel as well. So it's got my X1K series visions, all my race footage. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, and other than that, just hopefully you guys can tune into what we have planned for the rest of the year.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, again, I really appreciate you taking the time, but we're going to close things out. So have fun and ride safe.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Make sure that you subscribe. I cannot stress this enough. It's the best way to prevent yourself from missing our upcoming guests. So last time we had the creative marketing manager for 509, David McKinney, on. You may have missed that if you didn't subscribe. But you have a chance. Go ahead and subscribe now, and you will not miss the Taylor Hyman episode coming up next. She rocks it out in there talking about moto and marketing. I mean, those are the things that I love. So it was great. Also, head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review. That would be fantastic. It really helps the show attract guests and also more listeners. And make sure you're following us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. But I do want you to pay specific attention to our Facebook page because that's where we do our live videos. Now, when we go live, we do it twice a month. Some of our followers will get a notification, but Facebook throttles that back so that only a certain number of people get that notification. But you can change a setting in your Facebook so that you put Sponsored Rider Club Podcast as one of the pages that you see in your top 25, and you can ask to be notified when we go live. So go investigate your settings, figure that out, Google it, and you'll be able to make that happen. To get some insider access to upcoming guests, go ahead and check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. It is a group. Go ahead and request to join. As long as I can find out that you have some sort of motorsports passion, whether it's in a profile picture or cover photo, then I'm going to hit approve. But go check that out. There's a lot of people on there that are willing to share their advice and help you if you have questions. Now, a special thanks for this show goes out to our sponsors, AMSOIL, Armor Cote, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out our other partners, GSP XTV Axles, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and One Stop Performance. Now, I look forward to serving you again next week. And also, I look forward to seeing you at the Vegas to Reno 2018 race. I will be back again. I will be with 4x4 Barbie and Bold Racing at the pits, and then also in the Bold Racing booth at the Tech and Contingency Day. I will be conducting live interviews there. I'm actually testing out the microphone for that show right now. So I recorded the show today, the intro and the outro, using my new microphone setup, and it's going to be a great way for me and another guest to sit down live and talk. So I hope to see you there. Until then, have fun and ride safe.